It's kind of that journey of how do we end up where we're at? And where you're at today doesn't always mean where you're going to end up tomorrow. And you go through these different changes. And for us, a lot of different things that changed led us to this asset class. And we have a ton of fun doing it.
Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all.
Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? So I said my apologies on the air, and this is or now I am saying it on the air, but I've been waiting for a long time to have this gentleman here in the lab with us who, we just got right into it right away offline. We're talking about businesses, 8-figure boardroom, short-term rentals, vacation rentals, real estate, businesses. And we were talking about how, when again, iron sharpens iron. And I strive to have individuals like the individual I'm about to introduce come into the lab with us, because you talk about one thing that you talked about is being able to last in these spaces when you've done something for a very long time. And when you do last, there's a few people who are left in the room with you, and you surround yourself with some of the top people in the industry across the board in business and in real estate. So I want to take this time to roll out the red carpet and welcome you to what we call the lab, where we have practitioners who not only just talk the talk, but they actually walk the walk and have done the work the way you've done it, the way you've built your company. So without further ado, Shawn, welcome to the lab, my friend. How's it going?
Ruben, thanks for having me, man. I'm super excited. Like we were talking about before we hit record, we're just, you just came back from a big mastermind. I know a number of the guys there and that you're surrounding yourself with. It's just really fun to have great conversations with great people. So I appreciate you having me on today.
You bet. Of course. It's the honor is mine. And I know you are the founder of the number one vacation rental investing education company in the world, but I know that there's a lot of different things that came from that. And similar to, when you gather a lot of experiments, you gather a lot of data. So take me back to, and I like to say this actually, let's say I meet you, you are not at the SDR Wealth Conference, but we're sitting next to each other and I shake your hand and I say, hey, Shawn, what do you do for your living? Right? What do you typically say with, again, the body of work that you've kind of built, and what is your go-to? What are you most proud of that you like to maybe open up the conversation with?
Yeah, it's interesting because I look at myself as a real estate investor first and foremost. That's what I do for a living. I've been a full-time real estate investor for 22 years. That's what has always paid my bills and what I hope to continue to pay my bills well into the old retirement ages, if those ever come. And if we actually ever hit the retirement button, I guess I should say. I love what we do, so I don't see myself retiring. But I also do mention, we started doing this and I love and have a passion for helping people build those portfolios to help them build lifestyle and financial freedom as well. So that's where that's really what we do. But as far as what I really identify with, I identify myself as an investor first and foremost, and it's all I've really ever done.
That's amazing. Now, obviously, you've written books and you've done the whole 9 yards. And tell us a little bit about the company, like how or before you even got into the education platform, like what kind of real estate did you get into? To give context of those who are listening, as to, I always like to give this podcast an opportunity, and this show is an opportunity for those to identify a niche and identify what's out there and then be able to double down. Which experiment did you double down in, as we call them, experiments that you saw worked, and why did you double down in this niche?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm going to reel back the time a little bit, because as you mentioned, kind of in the lab, right? You go through, we try things and we iterate. We try again, we iterate. We try again, we iterate. It never comes out of the box exactly how we thought it was going to come out, right? And I've been in the real estate game now for 22 years. I've gone through some ups and downs, some different asset classes. I started off in fixing and flipping for the bulk of my career. And early on, when I was in my 20s, I had a decent sized, at least I live in northern Utah, and in my market, it was a decent sized fix and flip company. We were flipping about 60 homes a year. And so full flips, like we were going in and rehabbing them and selling them, right? They weren't wholesale deals. We were buying them, doing a full rehab and selling them. So it was doing well, and it started picking up. And I remember at the time I was in my 20s and thinking I was this big deal. I thought, oh, I'm the, sticking my chest out, telling everybody how awesome I am, and showing up at real estate investment club meetings and talking about what a big deal I was or thought I was at the time. And I remember back then, this old boy named George put his arm around me and he said, Shawn, you got to take it down a notch or two, my friend. You're not the investor that you think you are. And I remember thinking to George, I thought, what the heck is he talking about? And he said, you've got a job fixing and flipping homes right now. And so unless you can build a portfolio of assets that pay you passively long-term, that's what an investment is. He said, so you're not an investor if you don't actually own investments. And that was the first real light bulb for me that went off. And I thought maybe, as shot as my ego felt, as mad as I was at George at the time, I went home and I talked to my wife and thought, maybe George is right. Maybe I do need to figure out how to actually buy investments, and own investments that pay and ultimately deliver passive income long-term. And so that was that first iteration. And so at the time, my natural tendency was to go into long-term single-family rentals because that's what I flipped. I flipped single-family homes. And so we built a portfolio of single-family rentals. And this was in the early 2000s. And so I started building a portfolio of long-term single-family rentals from about 2002 to 2005. And we picked up 52 single-family rentals. And a decent portfolio. Back then, loans were a little easier to get. If you could fog a mirror, you could get a loan, and you could get investment loans for 5% down. And so I was able to buy properties pretty quickly, which is what ultimately led to the mortgage crash, because they were giving loans to people they probably shouldn't have back then. But and so when somebody says, how did you buy so many homes? I couldn't do that right now. It's probably true. It would be more difficult to go get that many loans, but we were able to do that. And in 2005, I chose to sell these homes. I said, you know what, this really isn't for me. Again, I tried something, wasn't quite working. I didn't really enjoy owning these properties. And at the time I sold them at 2005. Well, 2006 and 2007 was kind of the height. Things started to drop. And I thought, oh, maybe I made the right decision. It was probably the biggest mistake I've ever made at the time. And because I had 52 properties that somebody else was paying for, and I was making positive income on every one of those properties. And so had I just let those assets continue to mature and continue to maximize, that would be a pretty nice portfolio of paid off properties at this stage in the game. But at the time I thought, okay, I've got some decent equity. I'll put it into, we started to end up doing development deals, the big chunk money again, right? Work on a development deal, take these big chunks of money. And I really didn't have anywhere to put it. And I started working on a big resort development at the time in 2006. And I'm talking like $25-30 million second home properties, very high-end exclusive private ski and golf resort stuff here in Utah. And having a lot of fun doing it. It was a really fun part of the process. It was not my development though. And we were working with a couple of developers. They asked my wife and I to help them on the sales and marketing side of it. And one day in 2008, the feds came in and locked up file cabinets, took computers and said, you guys are done. The owners got indicted on securities charges and we're shutting this resort down. And that was a big shock for me, and a big, a moment in time where I was just like, what's going on here? This isn't our fault. And frankly, I threw myself a 6-month pity party. And I decided to point fingers at everybody else and said, this wasn't my fault. We were making really good money for a decent amount of time and I actually only lasted about 6 months before all of my money was gone. I lost my house, I lost my vehicle. And so another lesson, right, is to say, okay, listen, because I was making good money does not mean I really have anything long-term, because I was spending it as fast as I was making it. And so we lost everything in 2008 and 2009. And a lot of people assume because we were in real estate that that's why we lost everything, because the real estate tanked. It wasn't because real estate tanked. It was because I wasn't smart with my money and I didn't do anything proactively when I had a hiccup. And so at the time though, I started going back into real estate, started doing development deals. Fast forward, had some kids and we had twins. And I was working on a development deal. We always take them to Hawaii on their week of their birthday. That's what we do for their birthday. Instead of presents, we go to Hawaii for the week there because they're twins. We just celebrated it there. And I was on the phone and my son was turning 4 and I was frustrated about a development deal. And he said, Dad, yeah, as soon as I got the phone, he grabbed my hand. He said, Dad, if you don't like real estate in Utah, we should move here and you should do real estate in Hawaii. Right. And it was a version of like, hey, Hawaii's way better than Utah. So let's move to Hawaii and everything will be better. And didn't think anything of it at the time for him. But for me, I was going through one of those points in time where you're starting to say, what iterations do I need to make? What do I need to learn from the past and say, what do I really like? And I loved investing in real estate. I love long-term passive investments. And I loved the resort side of the game. And what actually happened as well is when we were making pretty good money, we actually bought a second home. And we bought a second home, a vacation cabin in Utah in 2006. And I had this asset. I lost everything and I kept this one asset. And at the time, it was way before short-term rentals were ever popular. But when I started not being able to pay my bills, I put it on Craigslist and some local classifieds and started renting this property out. And I saw that this short-term rental that I owned actually performed really, really well. And it performed really, really well during one of the major slides in real estate that we've ever seen. And so back in this conversation with my son happened in about 2013, 14. And I saw this slide. I saw us keep this asset. I saw us making money. And I loved that hospitality game when we were in the high-end resort. And that's when I actually said, this is it. This is the asset that I want to go into. And this is the asset that we want to niche down to way before it was really popular, right? This is in 2014 and 15. And we actually started becoming short-term rental investors at that time. And ultimately we built a portfolio of these properties. We've got, we've been financially free now for a long time with that portfolio. If I don't work another day, my bills are paid and we make pretty good money just from the properties that we own. So I took those lessons. I decided this was the niche and the asset class that I really enjoyed owning. Now you're never going to hear me talk bad about real estate. I love real estate. I think real estate is the number one vehicle for the average person to build lifestyle and financial freedom. I particularly happen to like short-term rentals, but they have pros and cons like any other asset class, right? You know that, right? We have taken that and then we started doing this. Never thought in a million years I'd ever coach this stuff. Never identified as a coach, never identified as somebody that would start any sort of a coaching company like we've done. But we decided I was speaking on other people's stages at the time, outside of the short-term rental game, just regular real estate stages, and started really helping people do this. And I started realizing how fun it was to see other people start to have success and change their life. And that's what it's grown into today, Ruben. That's a long-winded answer for you, my friend. But it's kind of that journey of how do we end up where we're at, and where you're at today doesn't always mean where you're going to end up tomorrow. And you go through these different changes. And for us, a lot of different things that changed led us to this asset class, and we have a ton of fun doing it.
I love that because you just basically summarized what I believe is basically what our brand stands for, right? Experimenting. When you talk about it, it's like you have to first have some form of a blueprint to apply. And then when you do take the time to apply, you get data. And then with that data, again, with a lot of data that's out there, you make a decision based on the data that you get, right? And we like to use proofs of concept, right? Because if Shawn's done it, it can work for myself as well, right? So I'm curious. I saw a little bit as I was listening, I saw a little bit of a pattern, right? You started flipping, then you got some data, and you're like, you know what, George, you're right. I should be investing. And then you invested, and then you're like, you know what, I'm going to liquidate. I'm going to get to development. And then, so I'm curious because I want to teach people not what to think. I want to teach them how to think. So how, and then maybe there's some hindsight there too. How do you analyze? Because people might be finding themselves in this situation now, right? You've got interest rates going up, etc. You got some things that are not the same anymore. And you talk about selling, you talk about buying. How do you assess a situation and what is the right decision or the wrong decision, or how do you make your decisions along the way with the data that you get? Because I see that you go through these iterations, but I'm curious as to, is it a most like, hey, you know what, cut the cord, burn the bridge, take action and figure it out? Is it, what do you go through so that we can, Experiment Nation can understand like, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I've never thought of it that way. You mind sharing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a difficult thing to go through, right? You've got the one side of the coin that's, hey, shoot, fire, aim. And it's just like, I'm going to see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. The other side of the coin is, analysis by paralysis. You want everything perfect before you make a decision. And there's this middle ground where we have to be able to make decisions and take action without having everything we need. And so I've heard Ed Milet talks about, a guy that I listen to a lot. He always says, there's the difference in the amount of information that somebody that's really successful needs, the amount of information that successful person needs to take action and move forward is a lot less than the unsuccessful person. And it's interesting to hear that, because successful people are willing to move forward and say, okay, listen, I have enough information to make an educated decision to move forward, but it might not be perfect. And I'm okay if it's not perfect, because I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to go make an iteration. I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to make a change, and I'm going to apply it again for the next time. And so I'm going to make it work. But so, we have these two sides of this coin that we have to find that middle ground. And for me, it was, that's one of the things that I've been okay with, is failing. I don't mind failing, because in at least in somebody else's term, definition of failure is, it didn't work out. For me, not working out just means I found a great way for it not to, that's that much closer to success. Right.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that, because, do you think that it's something that you can coach, or do you feel like some people are like, oh, like I'm a little bit risk adverse, and when's the last, like, at what point is it like, okay, I'm doing it again? Do you feel that it's something that's nurture or nature?
I think it's nurture for sure. I think that naturally we want to run from failure. We want to run from scary things, right? And I was talking to my son about this the other day, and he was, I was talking to him about the fight or flight mechanism. For millions of years, we've been programmed to run from scary things for survival, right? We don't have to run from scary things to survive today. But our natural tendency is, when we see challenges and scary things, we want to retract and not go forward. And so 100%, I believe it's nurture, because we have to teach ourselves that it's okay to go toward the scariness. It's okay to have that kind of flight or that fight mentality. It doesn't mean you're going to fight every time that a challenge comes up. It means you're going to attack a challenge, and you're willing to go figure it out and fail, because everything worth having is on the other side of that challenge, is on the other side of possibly some failure, right? Anybody that is really good at anything, they didn't come out of the womb amazing at it, right? Yeah. They didn't, like, think about your greatest successes in life. It wasn't probably really easy and natural in the beginning when you started doing it. And so 100%, I think it's nurture. And I think it's a mindset of saying, it's okay. I'm okay to not be perfect at it the first time I try it.
One thing that, and I'm curious to see what you might say to this, because maybe because you're a coach, and you've seen a lot of different people sitting across from you, or maybe it's virtually or in person or whatever the case might be. But what do you think someone can do right now to check themselves when they're going through the analysis paralysis? Like, is there something we can kind of, and again, it doesn't have to be that tactical, but I'm curious, is there something that when you can check yourself and be like, hey, I've done it again? Is it, 3 strikes, you're out? Like, what is it, do you think, that can help someone be like, you know what, I think this is what Shawn was talking about. How do I measure this if I'm doing it? Do you know?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And I'm just going to back it into a real simplistic, if we're really trying to train ourselves to try new things and move forward and growth. And really, that's what we're after, right? It's really growth. You're not going to grow without really challenging yourself. And so I always say, like I told my son, if there's something I don't want to do, I'm going to do it. Like, and so, like, we build self-confidence.
That's so good, by the way. Like, Shawn, I don't think, like, I just don't want to let that slip through the cracks. Like, if there's something that you don't want to do, you're creating the habit of doing it anyway, right?
Yes, absolutely. Like, simple. I'll do these different things with myself, just challenges myself, right? I'll say, I'm going to brush my teeth left-handed for a week. and I don't want to brush my teeth left-handed for the week. And then if I think the next week, I'm glad that's over, I don't want to do it, I'm doing it for another week, right? Same with like, it's even to the little simplest things in life every single day, because what happens is you start to identify with a person that will do the challenging things and will do the hard things. And your identity is more important than anything else. And if I start to identify with a person that can do hard things and is okay with challenges, now all of a sudden, when something really scary comes up, or I have to go and I'm trying to do something new, whether it's investing in something, whether it's taking on, better health habits, whatever that is, if I do the littlest things every single day, and I tell my son this, and I was having this, it's funny, we were just having this exact same conversation. So it's funny that you and I are talking about this now, is think of the things that you don't want to do and do them immediately. Like just go toward them, and your self-confidence will skyrocket, because we're more self-confident when we keep the promises we make to ourselves. And if I make a promise to myself that I am going to when I say I don't want to do something, I'm actually going to do it. When I do that, all of a sudden, immediately my identity is like, yep, I'm the guy that really goes after the challenges and the hard things.
Experiment Nation, I have a special gift for you. If you're in the Airbnb space, or if you're thinking of getting into the Airbnb space, you're an operator with multiple units, your first unit, your 100th unit, just about to get into Airbnb, you are going to want to get this blueprint that I put together for you. Now, I want to give context of how this was put together, because sometimes people assemble these ideas and top 10 lists, top 5, top this, and it doesn't have any true valued vetted content. What I've done is I've surrounded myself by the best top short-term rental Airbnb operators in the world. I co-authored a best-selling book with them called Hospitable Host. I've had them on my platform and interviewed them to get the questions that you guys want to learn the most from into the episode, the show, The Real Estate Experiment, as you know. And I've also paid tens and thousands of dollars to be sitting in the room to get these notable insights that we implement ourselves as short-term rental operators. I'm a short-term rental specialist. I'm licensed to do it in the respective markets. We build ours in Georgia. We have a management company ourselves. We're Airbnb Superhost. So we not only talk the talk, but we walk the walk, but we still consistently surround ourselves with the best in the space to get us further ahead. And this is what we've put together, an Airbnb Millionaire Blueprint, where you don't just hear it from me, you hear it, and it's an aggregate list. It's 21 pillars from short-term rental operators worldwide who've implemented this, and it's worked. And these are the exact same way we've been able to get results and get the same results from implementing these insights that I've pulled from multiple faces, right? Some people have tons of arbitrage units like TJ Tijani. Some like Bill Faith have just a few. Some like Michael Shogun has boutique hotels. They've scaled, and whether you have 1 unit, 10 units, or 100th unit, or about to get into your first unit, you're going to want to have this blueprint that you can utilize universally wherever you are in the world. Want to get this. I put together, we took a lot of time to put this together this year after all that we've been implementing in our lab, for you to have a guide that you can leverage, right? That you can use and implement. We've also given and tagged everybody that we've featured in and giving them credit, so you know where the source is coming from. And you can check out their Instagram. You can see that they're vetted individuals that we not only work with and trust but learn from, because sometimes you get a lot of different information, and I want to make sure I give that credit where you can find out that person. And we've also, if they've been on our show, we've also linked the episode within this free blueprint. It's the Airbnb Millionaire Blueprint. Want to make sure you go to experimentrealestate.com. Once you get there, you'll see the pop-up that says I have something for you. Just scroll down, enter your name, enter your email, and we'll get it right sent to you. Don't want to sleep on this. We've been putting this together for quite some time, and I know that it will serve you regardless of where you are in your journey, to have an Airbnb Millionaire Blueprint that has been collectively vetted and has been sourced from operators who are operating at a high scale. Experiment Nation, you are welcome. Make sure to go to experimentrealestate.com and get your Airbnb Millionaire Blueprint, so that you can also scale to the level of experiment that these practitioners like ourselves have done just for you. Experiment Nation, we'll see you on the other side. John, that is so good. And it's so good because it's in our control. And sometimes you want to put it out there like maybe when asked a question, probably a lot of us went to an external factor, but really you're saying look inward. And we all, it's so funny when you say that, when you think about it, we all know what we ought to do
Yes.
most of the time.
Yeah.
Right. But sometimes you try to look for an alternative or a shortcut. And it's like, if you just take the time to listen to that voice, which, you know, I would say half of the time is probably that's what you need to do. You got to pick up the phone. There's no campaign or email or thing.
Yeah.
Like, you got to have that crucial conversation. And you're probably looking, if you look inward, you're probably looking for an alternative solution because your brain wants to make your life easier by
Yes.
default. So you have to think the opposite. And one of the things I do, I want to share with you, Shawn, is it's turned into a habit, and I do identify with it. It's funny, my brand is called Experiment, but because I'm a person of integrity, and I say that I'm prefacing it for a reason, because if you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it, then it doesn't help, because you're a person that doesn't do what they're going to say.
Exactly.
So for me, I'll commit and I'll say, yes, I'll have this done Friday. I'm like, gosh, what did I say Friday?
Yeah.
Now it's got to get done. Or I remember how I started my agency. A client of mine asked me, or soon to be client was like, hey, can you do this social media stuff that you're doing for us? And I said, yes, absolutely I can. And I was like, damn, now I got to go figure it out. And so the thing is, I'm a person, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And if you tell yourself, like that little exercise of, you tell yourself you're going to wake up at this time, you wake up at the time. You tell yourself you're going to brush your teeth, you with your left hand, you do it. Then now you're I love what you said. You're building this self-identity of like, I will overcome and do what I say I'm going to do. Therefore, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Right. And man, that's so good. That tells me everything I need to know. That's why I went there, Experiment Nation.
There you go.
Look like you want to add something there.
It's funny, like you mentioned too, Ruben, it's when you ask somebody, if like somebody that is overweight or they're struggling with their health, and they know what they have to do to get in, they have to eat better and they have to exercise, right? And usually, eat, sleep, and exercise. And so we get all that dialed in. They know how to do it, but they don't identify with the person who's actually going to make themselves uncomfortable to get to where they need to be, right? They're going to say, okay, I'm going to make decisions to make things easy instead of possibly uncomfortable, which is going to lead to the growth. And so it's such an interesting thing. I learned this by doing it myself. When I lost everything, I went to everybody else and blamed everything else. I didn't look internally and say, okay, what should I have been doing? What do I need to do right here to make my life different than what it actually was at that time in my life? And it's so you learn these things over time. And it's just, and when you start to coach people and you talk to people, most people know what they have to do. And it's not it's not the technical aspect of usually anything. It's not the how-to that gets in their way. It's identifying with who they are and are they willing to get uncomfortable to experience the growth that they're really after.
Let's talk about that. That's a good segue for most people know what they need to do. Do you think most people know how to build wealth?
No. So no, I don't think that okay, that's a great point. No, I don't think that most people probably know how to do it because they've never done it. But the wealth of information and the amount of people out there that they could find that can help them that have done it, right? It's important. Like you and I were talking before, we love masterminds. We pay a lot of money, multiple six figures every single year in mentorship, right? So I don't need to know how to do something as long as I know how to go find somebody that has done it before me, because they know how to do it. I'm willing to accelerate that progress and pay somebody to help me. You can go figure anything out either. So even if you don't know how to do it, I do believe that anybody could go figure out how to build wealth, with enough time and effort, right? We're trying to accelerate that progress because there's a lot of options available to us nowadays with the wealth of information available. And so that can be a detriment as well, because what we were talking about, you're going to look at all these different options. And when you have all these different options, you've got to pick one. And there could be 5 that could all get you to your end result. There's different ways to skin a cat, and 5 different people telling you different things to do. All of them can work. You have to ultimately pick one as well, or go figure it out on your own.
I love that question, by the way. And I kind of want to ask you what you think. And it was a segue. It wasn't even, it was built on what we just talked about. Cause you're like, most people know what you need to do to a certain level. And now I want to get into like what you offer is the education behind kind of building wealth and using a very strategic vehicle. But if you were kind of put on the spot, like I'm putting you on the spot right now, because I think it's interesting how we define it. And you've seen it on very different levels. You've achieved financial freedom, etc. In layman terms, like how would you define in a couple sentences how to create wealth?
Yeah. So one, I need to create wealth. One, I've got to be able to take my active income and turn it into some sort of passive income that can actually multiply over time. So seems simple, right? Lots of different investment vehicles to help you do that. But I've got to be able to say, okay, I have to not spend all of my active income. So we've all got a certain amount of active income that we're working with, some more than others. And I've got to be able to take that, spend less than I make, be able to put it into something passively or an investment vehicle that can create passive income and ultimately appreciate in value or build over time as well. Because true wealth is a combination of different things. It's not just always the passive income you're making. It's not just appreciation. Yep. It's not by businesses just going up in value like over time. Like it's a combination of all those things. So you've got to find a vehicle that can have a couple different things that are stacked on it so that you can actually accelerate your wealth building process. And so the key though is being able to take what you earn, formulate a plan to purchase assets that can get you where you want to go.
Do you think it's best for those listening to plant this hard-earned income into multiple vehicles or one that they understand to double down in? Just curious. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer either. Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think that both diversified portfolios and a more laser focused approach can both work. I'm a big fan of a laser focused approach.
Yeah. I've heard of, I personally think that it depends what stage you're at. Right. I think
I would totally agree with that. And I think I know right where you're going. Yeah.
In the beginning, and I think about the, like an hourglass, like first, educate yourself on all the different mediums so that you're educated. And then I would pick one that you just double down in. And then once you have this high return on investment on this one vehicle, because it's niched, then I would diversify and broaden. And I think depending on people's level, sometimes you see, oh, well, this guy, has 10 different income streams, but it's like, yeah, but he started with one. But at the same time, I'm curious that, maybe that's not the case. And I do want to get a chance to help you transition this into kind of what and by the way, excuse me if I pronounce this incorrectly. Is it Vodyssey?
Vodyssey. Yeah,
Vodyssey, right?
Yep.
You've kind of built, it's a segue for, how you educate. When you educate in your program, so let's see, you have you have guides, you have proven paths, you have, everything. Do you tell people that, hey, this is the vehicle that worked for me? I've tried many. This is the one you should, double down in, and here are the results. Like, can you tell us a little bit about your ecosystem at Vodyssey so we understand like what your, what blueprint you're giving us in the lab?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one, I think you just made a really great clarification. I want to reiterate too, is I think you're exactly spot on, 100% agree. It's good to look at a lot of different things in the beginning to kind of decide where you're going to go. But in the beginning, then I think you pick one, you stay laser focused. Once that's going, it's good to layer on. That would be my opinion as well. I don't know if that's the right or wrong opinion, but I totally agree with you on that. At Vodyssey, so we've changed. So we're in the short-term rental game, for example. This is kind of a good example of narrowing down and doubling down on one specific thing. One, we narrowed down on the asset class of short-term rentals. We did that back in 2015, before it's as popular as it is today since COVID, right? But also what we did, we then triple doubled down because we only talk about the ownership model, right? We only talk about owning these assets with full service management in place, that we don't manage our assets. And so we work with investors wanting to buy and own these properties. That's different than, like, we understand the rental arbitrage game. We understand the co-hosting game. We understand self-management. We know how to do that. We've been in the game long enough, but I don't teach people all that stuff. I don't say, okay, come into Vodyssey, for example, and look at all these different things and decide which ones works for you. We say, if you're going to come into Vodyssey, here's what we're going to teach you. because that's what that's what we're most passionate about, right? That's what we do. And so it's an interesting, even there where we at Vodyssey really niche down into very specific ownership model and ignore the other assets. And we know, like you and I have, multiple, acquaintances and friends who do a lot of different models. They're all really good models, right? Yeah. The co-hosting, the arbitrage. I know a lot of these guys that own all these companies that teach that. It's not that it's bad. They're really good models. We just particularly focus on the ownership model. And so that's another example of us really niching down of what we are going to help people with.
Got it. So would you say it's more or less teaching people how to buy turnkey vacation rentals?
No, it's not. It's understanding how to buy and analyze markets and properties, but a lot of them aren't turnkey. We are going to set them up to be turnkey, but a lot of properties we're looking for, undermanaged, undervalued, like assets that really aren't hitting their maximum potential, whether that's management, whether that's in the market, whatever that is. We're looking for underperforming assets in markets that have the potential to perform well, but a lot of times they're not turnkey. We're going to set them up turnkey ultimately, but that's not how we what we go look at buying. Now, it's going to be interesting as these markets shift around. I think we're going to find, and we have been finding recently, some really nice turnkey assets from people that got into the game and they rode this wave. The last 2 or 3 years, owning short-term rentals is like having toilet paper during COVID. I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, everybody was making money. That's not a normal market cycle. And so we're going to see normalcy come back in play. Nice thing is we've been in this game since before the COVID stuff hit, for 4 or 5 years before that was hit. And so we're finding people that rode the wave and they've got some amazing assets that we're like, okay, so maybe it turns into more turnkey properties. Who knows in the future?
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, Shawn, because as I'm hearing you speak, I also hear that there's some operators that got in and it was easy, and now it's getting super competitive, and you gotta put a lot more work into it. That it's not so much passive, and maybe that's what they didn't want. I'm curious to see where your avatar fits in. Are you looking to have when you teach your students? Are you looking to help them acquire an asset, and then you're baking in that they're gonna leverage a third-party company to manage it on their behalf? So the numbers need to factor that in. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. And so like for me personally, I don't manage any of my own properties. I have full service property managers and I pay anywhere from 30 to 35% on all of my properties. So that's a big chunk of your gross revenue. So you better be able to underwrite a property that actually is in a market and a property that actually can support that and still make me money. And so, yeah, it's an interesting business model for us because not every property works in the way that we're going to set them up.
Yeah, I love that. That's so interesting, by the way, because I come from a world too where it's either like it's self-managed, etc., and you're running the numbers. Now you're taking 35% chunk out and your deals are still working. I'm curious, what kind of cash on cash return do you guys typically, strive for? Again, there's different models for everyone. I'm just very curious what you're.
So we're looking at a cash on cash, just strict cash on cash return in our first 12 to 18 months, because we know that we're going to ramp up these properties. We know that these properties need to maximize. So we're looking at anywhere from 8 to 10% cash on cash the first 12 to 18 months. And then we want to make sure that we're buying assets in markets that have the potential to hit that 15 to 25% cash on cash after we've kind of maximized it and they start to mature. And then we're looking at internal rate of returns once we factor in the appreciation on these properties and then the tax advantages. We're looking in that 30, 40% internal rate of return.
Got it. What would you say to someone in your mastermind? Maybe let's say I joined your mastermind or your education program, and I said, "Hey, this is kind of like what we're doing. I buy a lot in this one area. Shawn, what are your thoughts of me building my own or starting my own company that will self-manage those assets? I want to hear your initial thoughts on that. Is that
100%? There's economies of scale with management. And so if you're going to build a portfolio in a specific geographic region, it is going to make sense at a certain point to have your own management team in place. So it depends on what your property goals are. Like if you're going to buy lifestyle assets all across the country and you have one property in one state and one across the country in another state, the economies of scale, you start to lose those a little bit because the only thing you really have are the software tools. Well, management in this game, the boots on the ground, part of the for your turnovers and all that, the boots on the ground, people with cleaners and turnovers, that's a big piece of the management puzzle, right? And so if somebody, and we have members who do just that, where they build a portfolio in a specific region, and it makes total sense for them to build a management team in-house because they, one of our members, he's bringing in gross revenue of $1.5 million on 6 properties in one area. There's no reason to pay 30% on those rather than he can build his own team for a fraction of that, right? Because it's all internal.
No, that's really interesting. And this is why it's so important for you to be clear on what your end goal is. And I'm just curious, when you see all these students coming into your program and members, do you call them students, by the way? I don't want to call them the wrong thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Members, students, yeah.
Students. Do you see that where I want to go with this is, I think half of the battle is being clear on what you want, because there's just so much out there, right? Like 100%. There's your program, and so do you find, and maybe even actually expand a little bit, because you're a part of a lot of these masterminds, do you find that the people who have the most kind of, I don't want to use the word success so loosely, but when I say that, let's just call it success or momentum, compound effect. Do you feel like it's those people who are just very, very clear on what it is that they want? And maybe if they're not there yet, how do you see that shift happen? Is it just, again, picking and selecting? I'm just curious, because you see a lot of these people, and I'm just curious if there's a common denominator here, because there's just so many different types of vehicles in the lab. And my goal is to be like, how do I pick, and how do I find clarity? And does that help? And maybe you can help me take this one home. Does it help? Have you seen it help? Does it help
100%
more than
it helps? Yeah, 100% over and over and over. I believe having clear, defined property goals. Like in our world, we take people through a property goal exercise and we tell them you take this serious, because this is going to be your guiding light and your North Star when you make decisions down the line, right? And so you're going to always have opportunities for different things. And if you're, Alex Hormozi always says, opportunity keeps people poor, right? And focus makes them rich, because when there's always all these different opportunities and you don't pick one with laser focus, you're just going back and forth, and you're not going deep on anything. For us in the short-term rental world, for our members who come in and that we're helping, we take them through the property goals worksheet, because some of the hardest students for us to work with, and where they spin their tires are these strict investors that come in with a bunch of money and they're like, I don't really care where I buy. I'm not going to use the property personally. It doesn't matter what market I go to. And so just show me the best markets. There's a lot of really good markets and really good opportunities. We're constantly tracking markets. And at any given time, we've got 50 or 60 top markets that we're tracking. And even if we tell them those 50 or 60, they sit and stare at the sheet and they're like, well, maybe I'm going to go to Green Bay. Maybe I'm going to go to Destin, Florida. Maybe I'm going to go down to Lincoln, Nebraska. And they never do anything. The easiest people are those people that come into us as lifestyle asset buyers. And they're like, hey, listen, we want to have a lifestyle asset in Branson, Missouri, and this is what we're looking for. We have a family of 5, and we want this property for us. We want to target an audience just like us, because we're part of our target audience. We can go in and dial that in and narrow that down, because they have a very specific thing that they're looking for. And so the more clear you can be on your goals and the road you want to run down, the more success you're going to have, because you'll sit there and you'll second guess everything you're going to do. And because you don't have that guiding light and that North Star saying, this is the road I'm going to run down. Even though this is a good opportunity over here, I'm going to ignore it for now, because this is the one I'm focused on.
Yeah. Wow. I honestly think that's half the battle, John.
Yeah, I think it's more than half the battle, honestly. You can just start running down the road with a clear goal and intention, and you're very clear on what you're after. it makes every decision you make so much easier. The hardest decisions are what to say no to, right? It's not to, because there's a lot of opportunity. Like we could sit here and talk about it. We could talk for hours on different opportunities and people that we know that are successful, that are killing it in buying businesses, doing short-term rentals, multifamily properties, doing Amazon FBO stores. There's all these different opportunities, and there's a lot of ways to make money out there. If you don't have any sort of clarity, you're just going to spin your wheels and nothing's ever going to happen.
So good. Listen, I mean, Shawn, you got so much cooking, and you must feel so fulfilled with your, 2,000, just around 2,000 active members. You got a big team, you got a proof of concept in place, you get to talk about it, you get to see other people change their lives. What's next for Vodyssey?
Yeah, we want to be the household name when it comes to, and really the gold standard of continue to raise the bar when it comes to short-term rental ownership and building portfolios. I have so much fun really seeing people. I've personally been in the real estate game for so long. I've had many ups and downs. We still don't have it figured out. I continue to play the game. I just made 3 offers yesterday. But it is so much fun to see people get in and change their lives. And I just love being a part of it. And when I started this, Ruben, I thought I would start a little group, and I wanted to help 100 people. I said, I want to help 100 people get into this game. And I was going to call it quits after that. And it's just been so much fun. I don't know that we want to be kind of that gold standard in a mainstream asset class at this stage. And it's fun watching the asset mature. We've seen the acceleration since COVID, which was crazy to see because we were in it before. And then what we've seen since, and then now seeing kind of that wave and shift around and change into a mainstream asset class. I'm really excited about the future for the industry itself, and being able to start to treat it as a professional industry and being a part of the journey with as many people as we can.
Love that. And it's funny you said you're making offers, because I just closed on a property last month and just put an offer today. Like, we're just constantly making offers, and buyers are buyers. So let me ask, because this is a sensitive, not a sensitive topic. I shouldn't call it sensitive. I want to be mindful of how I choose my words, but it's a topic in a conversation of, what's going on with the marketplace. 2020 was crazy. You mentioned it, right? So before you leave the lab, I'm curious, right? You get all this data, you see all these students, etc., and you're specifically in a business model that is about, it sounds like you make your money when you buy. It's essentially like every real estate asset that, how you analyze, how you buy is how you make your money. What is an owner, right? Because again, it doesn't sound like you're talking to operators, sound like an owner.
Yeah.
What should an owner be thinking or doing? And when we look at the shift of the marketplace, is it a matter of, maybe there's some capital I can redeploy in this market, or is it I gotta deploy some of that, reinvest some of that capital into my property to make it stand apart from the other? Like, what are you telling? What is the blueprint that is again very time sensitive, or with respect to what's happening right now in the marketplace, that you can leave some gems before you leave the lab?
Yeah. So it's really 3 things that come to mind. And it really doesn't matter what stage of the market you're in. You should be thinking about this. Even the last couple of years, when I said it was, everybody with a property made money, you should have hopefully still been thinking about understanding what the underwriting and the numbers look like, right? Really understanding to conservatively underwrite properties. When a market is shifting, you want to be super conservative. There should be no speculation when you're starting to run all your numbers, right? We're not buying hoping that they get better. We need to make sure the numbers work right now today when we buy, because if they don't work today, you might be riding it out in a flat market. If a market dips a little bit, there's got to be some cushion there. The next thing is, if you do own a property right now, what worked with your property the last 2 or 3 years is not going to work moving forward. And so my challenge for anybody who owns a property right now is to say, let me set my ego aside. Let me understand the potential in my market and what is it going to take to actually go out and articulate what I have to offer in a very crowded marketplace. And so that is going to be different for most owners and operators who are running these types of businesses, because that is a major shift that's happening. And one of the, if I could leave one thing, like a nugget of something for people to think about, is if you're on Airbnb, Vrbo, wherever you're marketing your property, and you're trying to sell the property instead of an experience, you're selling the wrong thing. And so consider that when you're marketing and articulating what you have to offer. And I hope that we just continue to raise the bar with that. But right now, we still see a lot of people doing the old school of, hey, I've got a model home and I'm selling my property. You've got to shift to think, okay, how can I sell an experience?
And we might have to create part 2 for that one. That's a whole conversation.
That is a whole It's a fun conversation. That's a good one.
Or you can tap into Vodyssey. I'm the worst. My wife right now would be, Ruben, that's not how you say it.
That is how you say it.
Vodyssey.
You got it.
Vodyssey.com. That's VODYSSEY.com. By the way, how did you come up with that name?
So I have, my original name was Lifestyle Asset University. And the state of Utah sent me a letter and said, hey, Shawn, you can't use the word university in a business name in Utah. It's one of the states that you're not allowed to do that. And so I had to change my name. At the time, we were kind of growing and I was worried about trademarks. And so I was trying to have a made up name. Odyssey is an epic journey. And so I threw a V on it for vacation homes and then said Vodyssey. And so it's kind of a made up name, and that's where it came from.
I'm so glad I asked you that, by the way. That's how you put a bow on it, man. Make sure you guys check it out, man. Lifestyle financial freedom starts at Vodyssey. I love your brand, love what you built, and man, that's incredible. I know where I can find you, but where can the rest of Experiment Nation tune in to what you're currently offering?
Yeah, you'll go to Vodyssey.com. You'll find our YouTube channel. You'll find our podcast, our book, anything they want. We've got a lot of free content that people can dive into there.
Shawn, appreciate you, my friend. Just like that, Experiment Nation, we are out. Experiment Nation, your host, Ruben Kanya here. Listen, if you're looking for a who in your next steps as a short-term rental host or Airbnb host or operator, that is, definitely make sure that you reach out to me directly by booking a call to see how you can get yourself to the next level. If you've never turned a house and repurposed it into a short-term rental or Airbnb, if you don't know what pricing tools to use, how to set up your listing so that's best optimized, how to set up a PMS software, let alone if you don't know what a PMS software is and why it's important, to, again, having dynamic pricing as a tool to stay ahead of your competition, to always be booked and not only be able to pay your mortgage, but cash flow some, and always make sure that you're giving your guests an experience that will have multiple other guests want to stay at your property, how to automate reviews, how to automate check-in details to messages for the guests, and so that you are no longer working in the business, but you're working on the business, how to build a virtual cleaning team, all of the above. Make sure that you go to experimentrealestate.com/hospitable-hosts, where you can book a call to see if you're a good fit for the coaching program that I am offering only to limited partners. If you're a part of Experiment Nation, if you're new to Experiment Nation, well, it's all about having the right individuals help you guide you through the next steps of where you're trying to go in your experiments. So if you're looking for guidance, if you're seeking out guidance, someone to help you, I am rolling out a new coaching program that is very hands-on. Therefore, there's only limited spots available, where you will work with me directly and I will help you take your short-term rental or your long-term rental into a short-term rental if you've never been a host before, or help you get to the next level. So make sure you go to experimentrealestate.com/hospitable-hosts so that you can take your experiments
in the short-term rental space to the next level with a guide and someone who's been there before. Again, I look forward to seeing you on the call. Make sure you book a discovery call. We'll see if we're a good fit for one another. And again, be sure if you're driving, if you're currently not available, to take the URL down. It will be in the bio description. Looking forward to seeing you on the other side and continue to experiment wisely. Happy hosting.